Well, I'm as surprised as you are. I think that we have yet another day of distance learning. Uh, I can't get my car out. I suppose it's probably just as bad down there in Westmoreland County as it is up here. So it was a good thing that they closed the campus. I'm hoping that will everything will be back to normal on Thursday. I looked at the weather. There's no snow for 2 more days. I don't know if that'll make a difference in transportation, but it might. I want to say quickly, rather than put together a discussion agenda for Thursday, where you have two, just let me double check here. You have two, a podcast and a video to watch. I kind of rather to see how you do either putting together a discussion agenda or coming up with questions on your own. So what I think I'd like to do as the course goes on is to say essentially that all the texts will have discussion agendas written by me, but all the other stuff, the kind of, extra stuff, the podcast or videos, I think I'd like to have a more free form flowing discussion about that. So please, when you're listening to the Reconstruction podcast, or you're watching that C-SPAN video of interpretations of Reconstruction, jot down what you think are the important points and what things you learned from it, and we'll have a free-for-all discussion on Thursday. Now, if that doesn't turn out very well, in other words, if no one writes anything down or if the discussion goes nowhere, then I'll have to start creating my own discussion agendas. But I very much want you to be as involved as possible in the class, and almost universally, whenever I do this, students make very interesting comments and have very interesting questions. So it's better when it works. It's better. So I hope that will be okay for everyone. Now, before we start, any questions? Oops, I'm in the Canvas page. I know we need to be in this page. Mike has just entered. No questions? All of you read, I hope, the chapter in the document reader. Okay, well, let's get started then. I'm going to move this screen over. So if I look over to the side, it's because that's where I'm looking at Zoom rather than looking at the actual questions. So let's go through this. One of the most important things about the post-Civil War period is the shocking number of times, and by shocking I mean surprising, that the government and especially the Army would do this, that they actually sit down and ask people in the affected areas what they would like to see happen. Okay, as you can imagine, most armies run on very, very hierarchically. Orders come down from the top. It wouldn't have been at all surprising if Sherman had swept into Georgia and the Carolinas and the Sea Islands and all those places and said, okay, we're going to do it this way, and this is the way it is. But they have this meeting. So let me first ask you, before we go right into the question, what impression did you get from this document? Oh, by the way, just start talking, because I can't really see you because there's so many spread over the screen, so that none of this hand raising business. Yeah, Jack, go ahead. You're lit up like Hollywood squares.
Did you say me?
Yeah, your thing is lit up as if you're going to answer.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I thought it was interesting. So, it gave me a lot of information that I didn't really know about before.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of surprised with like how you mentioned how the army was actually like somewhat considerate of what people wanted, and kind of the effect that Abraham Lincoln being assassinated had on the whole original plan.
Hmm.
And yeah, I don't know. That's about all I got.
What other perceptions did general perceptions did you folks have? You must have thought something. Okay, let's go on to the question then. The question actually says, what did the freedmen of Savannah want from the post? Sorry, hang on one second. What did the freedmen of Savannah want from the post-Civil War government as reflected in document 1?
Doesn't matter who goes.
Doesn't matter who goes, just jump in. Again, we're just going to have to deal with this because I can't switch between the two.
Okay.
Well, it's hard to do.
They wanted to have land of their own, enlist in the service of government, wanted to be placed on land. I'm sorry, one moment. Basically, they wanted to make it on their own. They wanted to live by themselves. They just wanted to basically establish their own life on their own means without being told basically what to do and how to live.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's right there in the third question, right? The way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land. They could have said all kinds of things, money, there could have been all kinds of requests, and I think that tremendously influenced what Sherman was then went on to propose. What else? What else did they ask? What did you mean by when you said who said that, by the way?
Karina.
What did you mean when you said that they wanted to do government service or work for the government?
Like to be in the like what did they say? I'm sorry. They wanted to be like in the judicial branch, like justice of peace. They wanted to be like mayor, senator, just basically anything that's government officially involves, just assist the government in that way. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm muted because I coughed. Alyssa said this: they wanted the rebellious states to lay down their arms by a certain time, and if they didn't, all the slaves in rebel states should be freed, have their own. They wanted to have their own land, live on their own, maintain peace with government and neighbors, and assist the government. That was very, very interesting. How much detail I thought they went into when it came to let me just see who is beeping here. Is that me? Maybe that's me. I hate for that to be me. My computer beeping. Anyway, what was I saying? Let's look at the fourth question they ask here. State in what manner you would rather live, whether scattered among the whites or in colonies by yourselves. What do they answer there?
They wanted to live by themselves.
Yes, this is remarkably, by the way, you've got to remember, this is one person, Garrison Fraser, who is speaking for everyone, right? Why do they want to live by themselves? Who said that, by the way? Just so I know.
That was Lexi.
Okay, Lexi. He says right after, they prefer to live by ourselves. Why would they prefer?
because there was so much prejudice in the South that they were trying to get away from that.
And how many people in the group that Sherman is addressing, how many people want to live by themselves and how many people want to live together? I don't mean actual number, but just
I think it was just the one guy that wanted to try to coexist with the whites.
right. Right, a man named Mr. Lynch. And then what the other thing that yeah, so that surprises me that, well, it doesn't surprise me because they say there's a prejudice against us in the South that will take years to get over. But I don't know what I can answer for my brethren. So they go on and the sort of poll of the room, and everybody agrees with them except for one. But then the questioner, and then, by the way, I don't think the questioner is actually Sherman. It's I think Edward Stanton actually asked the questions. I can't remember where I read that, but I could be wrong. Anyway, so question number 5 is interesting. Do you think there is intelligence enough among the slaves of the South to maintain themselves of the government of the United States and all that stuff? Why do you think they asked that question?
Because during slavery, the African Americans weren't educated. They weren't allowed to be educated.
And there's certainly this perception that Southern plantation owners and Southern elites, sort of the Southern oligarchy, are saying all the time, well, you can't give slaves freedom. That they're not smart enough. They're more or less like brute animals. They have to be cared for in the way we've been caring for them, and that's the argument that they're getting back there is that it's not true. There is sufficient intelligence among us to do so. Okay. What else did you what has struck you after reading this document? What else did you think? You notice Sherman leaves the room and they ask Stanton, asks him, what do you think of General Sherman at the very end? This is question 12. Hello? Is everybody there? You've got the document up on your screen, right? Lexi, are you going to say, is it you're lit up there?
I was just going to say that I was just kind of reading over the 12th question because I read it a couple days ago, so I kind of forgot about what the question.
They seem to respect him a lot.
Yeah, in fact, they say it's the providence of God, it's especially set apart to accomplish this work, is really quite amazing. Now they could be trying to be very pleasant to Stanton and to by extension to Sherman. But by the way, notice that Mr. Lynch, again, he's sort of the guy who's the odd person out here. Mr. Lynch states that with his limited acquaintance with General Sherman, he's unwilling to express an opinion, in the same way that he was the only person who said that he wanted to live with whites. And then it says the majority, all others present, declare their agreement with Mr. Fraser about General Sherman. Okay, let's move on to the next document. Now, in the past, I have, of course, assigned these questions to specific people, but I was hoping not to have to do that this semester. We need to have more participation, though, in answering these questions rather than just a couple of people. Otherwise, I will start assigning them, and we'll start marking down who said what, and things like that. So what does Jordan, this is question number 2 on my discussion agenda. What does Jordan Anderson's response to his former master tell us, document 2, tell us about Friedman's, sorry, there's a typo there, memories of slavery and their hopes during Reconstruction? This again was a fascinating and complex document.
I love this document because it really shows his intelligence, and he's kind of cocky when he's writing back to his former master. He's kind of like, no, I have it pretty good up here, and don't think I forgot about what you did.
Yep. He brings up the issue that you shot at me twice in the very first paragraph. Right.
I was going to point out like the grammar mistakes that he had, not saying that he wasn't intelligent, but when you read through it, some of the sentences don't make sense. But he also talks about like the memories, like at the end where he's like, I didn't forget how you shot me twice, which was kind of funny, I thought. And at the end it says, thank him for taking the pistol from you when you were shooting at me.
Yeah.
Which was kind of strange because like, I don't know, he barely specifically remembered who even like saved him from the pistol, you know?
Yeah, I found it a remarkably, it's like he's writing to an old friend who has, this person is an old friend, but the old friend has also done him wrong in some way. So it's like he kind of wants to be on better terms with the old person, but he's not, not going to forget that you shot me twice. Alyssa has written, he seemed to show how he feels tolerantly good where he is and would want to come back because he doesn't have complete trust. Yeah, I think that's a very important factor here. Complete trust. You say you want me to come back and work the land, but what are going to be the conditions? What are going to be the things? And oh, by the way, are your overseers going to stay away from my daughters? This is this is another important person. That there's a very let me see where that sentence is. But by the way, in answering this letter, please state if there would be any safety for my Millie and Jane, who are now grown up and both good-looking girls. You know how it was with poor Matilda and Catherine. Now, we can sort of reasonably infer from that Matilda and Catherine were abused by overseers, or maybe by the master himself. I would rather stay here and starve and die than have my girls brought to shame by the violence and wickedness of their young masters. What I've always been impressed with this letter is he doesn't just say, go to hell. I mean, this is why people use this document when discussing this period, because he doesn't just say, no, go to hell. He says lots of things. I'm sorry, I'm squirming in my chair. I have a crappy desk chair and it's crappy.
I found it interesting that he almost had like a tone of satire for such a serious matter.
Well, yeah, you could certainly read it that way. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Elaborate. That's a good point.
I just think that he, like in what he was saying, you could either take it two ways. Like you could take it as he's seriously saying these things, or he's kind of like putting it in his former master's face. Like, this is what you've done to me, and this is how I'm going to react now. Like I've moved on from this.
Going off of what she said, I feel like he kind of rubs in the master's face how whenever he talks about how his children now go to school, how him and his wife have the opportunity to go to a church, and how he could send his kids to Sunday school, he really does like rub in like, hey, I have this now, like I don't really need you.
he kind of throws it back at him too. He's like, I make this much money now, and I'm not gonna come back until you pay me from what I did then. I think it was something around like $11,000 he came out to and said like, if you pay me, then I'll consider coming back. But until then, I won't step foot back there.
Yeah, that's an extremely good point, Kevin. And I think that's, and I think in saying that, and by the way, we can sort of speculate here a little bit. We don't have to say these are absolutely facts written in stone, but I think in saying that, he's sort of saying that like, that's basically the big answer, no. I'll only consider it if you give me the 11 grand or whatever it was. And he knows very well that this former slave owner is not going to do that. In a way, we don't want to psychoanalyze this. We don't want to analyze it too far along those lines. But in a way, he's sort of like getting out all his grievances in this letter, isn't he? When I read it about 40 times in my life, I suppose, and it seems to me that I keep saying, why are you even bothering responding to this guy? Just throw his letter away. Seems like you have a reasonably decent life here. In Ohio, why you know, just either ignore him or tell him to go to hell. So there might, that's why some people think there are these mixed messages. Yeah, that's what Alyssa's saying again. Alyssa's making great comments here in the chat. If you can see that, that's what I thought, because he said he was glad that he was still alive, meaning he was glad that the master is still alive. And by the way, he sends he more or less sends good wishes to Miss Mary and Miss Martha and Alan, Esther Green and Lee, blah, 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 blah. Give my love to them all and hope to see we'll meet in the better world, if not in this. You know, that's not the way you talk to someone you absolutely hate. But then again, he goes on to explain how in many ways he does hate him. I'm not saying that the letter needs to be consistent or that it needs to say one thing or another. It's fascinating to me how the depth and the sophistication with which he responds to his master's request. Yeah, Cecilia, this is another excellent point. Alyssa made a good point there. He seems really respectful in the letter, and that struck me as an intelligent move on his part. He isn't dramatic about it and doesn't express outright hatred. He takes the upper hand and doesn't let anger get bad feelings get the best of him. Okay, now here's the crucial thing. Okay, now that Cecilia's nailed this, right? For me, this letter is kind of like him getting closure. I agree with Cecilia. I think he's never going to say, yes, I'm coming back. And he's going to make these demands. He knows the master won't keep it. So this way, he's just like, I've said my piece. We're done. And he puts in these demands almost as if to say, I'm reminding you of what you did. And of course, he ends the letter by saying, say how did you torch Carter, who took the gun away from when you were shooting at me? So the chance that he actually is going to go back, I think, is almost zilch. All right, good points. Let's go on to question to number 3 here. Describe Charlotte Fortin's experiences teaching freed children in South Carolina. That's document 3. Now let me get back to that. Boom. Yeah. Again, this is a very interesting case. Again, this is from the Sea Islands, and some people think the Sea Islands, the situation on the Sea Islands out, those islands you see off the coast of Carolina that are and even off the coast of Georgia that are out there, you know. Alyssa's saying, she said the first day was rather trying, but notice how eager they already learned. And then Sierra's saying she thought it was wonderful how all that the Blacks went through, they still had a strong desire to learn how to read. Are any of you education, I'm sure some of you, most of you, maybe even are education majors?
Yeah, I am.
I am too.
Yeah, when this,
Me too.
and Sierra too, okay. How does this, when you read these things about how people talk about teaching and talk about schools and things like that, how does that strike you as a 21st century person rather than a 19th century person? I mean, no one now would even, I don't know, question or even bring up the idea like, yeah, well, of course I want to learn how to read. That's just a given.
Whenever I read that the first day was rather trying, I definitely get that because in my field placements, my first day has always been kind of rough.
Yeah.
So I definitely understand that and relate to that as an education major.
What is a field placement? Is that where you sort of like student teaching or going out there and
Kind of, yeah. Just depending on the school or where you go or what the teacher has you do. But you go to a school and you interact with kids.
Mhm. But she says here, though, the first day was rather trying, blah, 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 constantly restless. But I never, then she says later, I never before saw children so eager to learn, although I've had several years' experience in New England schools. Coming to school is a constant delight and recreation to them. They come here as other children go to play. And the older ones during the summer work in the fields from early morning till 11 or 12 o'clock and then come into school after their hard toil in the hot sun, as bright as anxious as ever to learn as ever. This is a almost universally positive. What else did you think?
I definitely don't think like the students now, like in middle school, high school, college, are as excited to go to school. I would say like elementary would be kind of like little kids that are still excited to go just for like their friends or whatever. But like including me, I'm not too excited to go to school because of education. But these kids, like they worked beforehand and then went to school, which I couldn't imagine now.
Well, and of course the parents, the structure of the freed system there is that the parents are allowing them to go to school at 11 or 12. That's obviously 11 a.m. and noon, not 11 p.m. and midnight. After they've done 4 or 5 hours in the of morning farm work. So there seems to be one of the problems with history is we always have to be careful about the cherry picking of evidence. So, it's very possible, very easy for me or anyone else to go back and find a whole bunch of documents that say school is wonderful and the kids love going to school and this is great for them and everything, blah, 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 blah. And just show you, I could just show you those documents and you say, gosh, this is amazing. These people have been impressed for so long, yet they want to go to school. And what was I just saying? We really need to continually search for as broad a range of documents as possible. I'm sure there were plenty of people who didn't go to school, right? One of the didn't want to go to school. Certainly, maybe older children didn't want to go to school. Although getting out of work in the fields has got to be a good thing or a preferable thing. But what historians of this period have actually found is they keep finding new stuff like this evidence, school records, all kinds of stuff. Remember, the country is massive, and so to go through the entire South and to find out as many school records as you can is the work of an entire lifetime. And I'm told, I'm reliably informed by the experts in this that is at Reconstruction Education, that this is almost the universal story. The students are really excited to go to school for the most part, and that the teachers, apart from the sort of general wrangling of them, the teachers are very infused with optimism because of the children's attitude, and it would so when there's that amount of evidence on one side of the question, it's pretty obvious what's going on. Now, let me just say, let's look at the second paragraph from the end. Sometimes it's hard to have them keep their attention in school, right? It's not strange that they've been so entirely unused to intellectual concentration. Teaching is necessary to interest them at every moment in order to keep their thoughts from wandering. Teaching here is consequently far more fatiguing than at the North, right? So as you said, but in order to get yourself heard, you have to have strong lungs. So what does that tell you? What does that sort of last two paragraphs tell you? Well, not last two, they're the paragraphs that I'm talking about after the lessons, all the way to where she talks about walking to school.
She was teaching a much larger group of people than she had been before.
Yeah, there's that. Yep, certainly. What else?
The children that she's teaching aren't used to the hours of education that maybe the children in the North are.
Do you get a sense, though, that she's like implying it's really, really worth it? First of all, she ends the thing by talking about how great the walk to school is. It was nice countryside and the birds are singing and all that stuff. You could very easily probably find especially a northern teacher comes down and absolutely hates it. Well, in theory, you could find them. It turns out you don't. But like I said, the evidence is overwhelming on the positive side.
She seems really proud of what she's doing and how her students are doing.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very, very good point, Ashley. A very good point. She seems very proud. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next document, which is, of course, the most one of the most troubling Mississippi Black codes. Describe and explain them. What are they? What are they saying? Why are you saying oops, Alyssa, in the chat? You wrote it and it's, oh, well, okay, it was misspelling. All right. First of all, I think the most important thing about, not most important, right off the bat, the Mississippi Black Code was written in 1865. Immediately. We have this notion that because of Gone with the Wind and other horrible things that and Birth of a Nation, that the Southern legislatures are completely overrun by out of control freedmen and stuff like that, and that the period 1865 to 1875 is really terrible for white people in the South. But they don't even wait till the wars. I mean, they wait till the war's over technically, but barely, in order to pass these laws. The way that the authors describe it here. Let me just share a screen a minute so I can get more. Let's look at that sentence. Now, this is not part of the Black Code. This is part of the way the editors of the American Yacht talk about it. Many Southern governments enacted legislation that reestablished antebellum power relationships. What does that mean?
So they wanted to immediately try to regain control. And I don't know, like they wanted another form of control, even though because they lost their first form of control, but they wanted to hide it within like laws and stuff.
Yeah, well, what does antebellum mean? Antebellum means before the war. So that's right. They want to reestablish the power relationships as best they can with what happened before. Notice that, for instance, under vagrancy law, all freedmen, blah, 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 blah. And don't have a job or business and are found unlawfully assembling, blah, 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 are become vagrants, right? Well, there is no vagrancy law for white people. I think, among many things, this shows you the strength of the this kind of the Southern elite class. It really the strength that they still have over what was going on in Reconstruction. You can't imagine Sherman out in Carolina and Georgia allowing this kind of stuff to happen, right? What else about this document is important? Well, what questions did I ask? Oh, describe and explain. What else about the Black Codes?
I thought one thing that in the Black Codes is if a freedman was caught in the vagrancy law, they kind of get trapped in a contract with an employer to pay off their fines.
Because vagrants, they've defined vagrancy as a crime. Your vagrancy that's against the law. What you can do, even under the 13th Amendment, is the slavery is banned, except as punishment for a crime. It's right there in the actual amendment. So if we create this crime called vagrancy, technically vagrancy is a sort of crime, but if we make a extra strength vagrancy for Black people, then we can sort of re-enslave them. Yeah. This still exists. Well, I don't know if it still exists. Prison labor, I think, still exists in the United States. You don't necessarily have chain gangs like you used to, but there is prison labor, right? That's what the 13th Amendment basically allows for. So the fact, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to turn this into a lecture, but it is a Black Code. It's creating specific laws related to Black people is not creating Mississippi's new legal code that applies to everybody. It doesn't apply to everybody. What is this when you read this in the detail of the Black codes? What does it sort of tell you about, or what does it maybe sort of hint at in terms of the possibilities in Reconstruction? Was it all hopeless? If if it's constantly going to be this problem every time white people get any kind of power, or I'm talking about this elite of former planters and former plantation owners. That's a better description, because obviously most white people in the South are not elites, right? They're poor white farmers without slaves. So, but this white elite class, right, of plantation owners, they're always going to be doing this, right? Somebody disagree with me? Is there? Is there something in here that, pardon me, might be hopeful?
I personally wouldn't think that anything about this would be hopeful, because as a slave, you would be looking forward to being free for so long. And then looking at all of these laws, you're technically free, but not free, if that makes
Right.
sense. There's so much that is into this that almost makes it seem like you're just not free.
You're definitely a second class or third class or fourth class citizen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, as many people have said, although this is anachronistic, this wouldn't have happened at the time, because no one thought about this was a 20th century solution to a 19th century problem, and that there needed to be a denazification of the South after the war. But that wasn't going to happen, and didn't happen. Skylar's Wi-Fi is going in and out. Okay. All right, good. Let's move on to the next one. Again, still 1868, it's not a tremendous amount of time after the war. Why is there this lawlessness going on? What kind of lawlessness continued in Texas? Oh, the KKK, right? And by the way, when you talk about the KKK, remember, this is the first KKK. The KKK goes through at least 2 iterations. Who are the? Yeah, okay. Now, what do they mean by union men? This is very, very important. This is Alyssa saying that the KKK would disarm, rob, and murder union men and Negroes.
Men fighting from the north.
Men who had been in the Union Army, and were now part of the occupation of Texas, right? But there's also this group. Remember, throughout the South, there are Southern Unionists. After all, President Andrew Johnson was a Southern Unionist. Vice president when he was vice president, and while the war was going on, he was anti-slave owner, anti-big plantation owner. He was a unionist, and there are lots of unionist people in the South still. So if the Ku Klux Klan are turning around and killing and robbing and assaulting not only African Americans but Union men, that's very significant. That they couldn't keep count. Yeah. the civil law east of the Trinity River is almost a dead letter. That's a pretty bold, that's a pretty strong statement. So this effectively lawlessness. And as Alyssa says, if you scroll down more, you can say the murder of Negroes is so common as to render it impossible to keep an accurate count of them. It's astounding. What do you, what does General Reynolds suggest at the very end be done?
He thinks that more troops are needed from out west and from the Union because the civil courts, these states, will not be able to punish the members of the KKK.
Right. Look at that final sentence: to restore measurable peace and quiet to Texas will require for a long time that troops be stationed at many county seats until by the presence and aid if necessary, the civil law may be placed in the hands of reliable officers and that civil law be executed. This will be the work of years and will be fully accomplished only by an increase of population. And what it means by the increase of population is that people, non-slave people coming in, union people, more union people coming in. Lots of people thought this at the time. One of the things the South needed to be, in order to get the South back into a vaguely normal place, you needed to have an influx of anti-slavery people from the North, right? Or definitely a bolstering of the anti-slavery people that existed in the South before. Okay. This, you know, we always talk about lawless Texas in American history, you know, the Wild West and all that mythological stuff. But you read this and you think that this is out of control. Almost 3 years after the war is over. All right, what about sexual violence is talked about in document 6? Sorry to have to put these documents in front of you, but this is what happened. So we need to understand it.
I thought it was so sad to read through all of them, especially reading like the word for word testimonies of them and what they did to the women. And then right after whatever they did, what they wanted to do with them, they would mentally abuse them, say that they were nothing, and basically like saying like they should go to hell, basically.
Yeah. Now, and all of you know that, you know, when for instance, Francis says, this is Francis Thompson, the men violated us. You know what that means, right? Don't have to spell it out for you. Okay, that means rape, and well, all rape is brutal, but particularly in this case, gang rape and rape along with other violence. Skylar saying they're so sad. Yes. What else?
The government also didn't help them. They just arrested one of the girls and was like, see, this one girl was lying, so everybody else must also be lying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Karina, what does the backslash mean? Is that some, I don't know, you just type backslash in this chat.
Sorry, that was an accident.
Okay. I didn't know if that was some sort of young person's, I don't know, like hashtag.
No,
or something.
no, I
Okay.
apologize.
All right. Well, but also notice how much other stuff is going on to these people. The addition to being attacked, brutalized, violated, raped, beaten, and all kinds of other. What else did they do? Rob, yeah, Alyssa says Rob. Okay. There were police officers who were doing this and all kinds of stuff. What always hits me about this document, these reports. This is a testimony to Congress. You can see how much hatred for Black people there is. It's coming through. You know, there's this sentence down here. This is in Lucy Smith's testimony. You have a mighty liking for those damn Yankees, but we will kill you, and you will have no liking for anyone then. There's this the sense of hate and brutality is so strong. Am I reading too much into that?
No, I don't think so, because then they also went to saying there were some pictures in the room of General Hooker and some other Union officers, and apparently the men said that they wouldn't have hurt them so bad if it hadn't been for these pictures as well. So
Yeah.
just for being like wanting their freedom and everything, they see that up there and then they say they did even worse because of that. There's definitely a lot of hatred.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Let's move on quick to get to so we can go to all these documents. Document 7, Frederick Douglass. How does he explain the nature of the Civil War in his 1877 speech? By the way, I hope you found that this was easy. The site was easy to work with because you just click, you go through one document at the bottom, you click, and it takes you right to the next one, right? One of the reasons I assigned this textbook. What did you think of this? Frederick Douglass. Again, this is 1878. This is after Reconstruction is over. What's he saying here?
He doesn't want everybody to forget that the war was fought to free the slaves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Already by 1878, people are starting to fight over what memory of the Civil War will actually mean, right? Who else?
I think the most important quote is on the second page, on the second paragraph, when it says it was a war of ideas, a battle of principles and ideas, which united one section and divided the other.
Yeah. It's very, very. Frederick Douglass is amazingly sharp. Well, not amazing. He's just very, very sharp. Very, very. Clear in his understanding of what happened. And remember, this speech, by the way, takes place in the North. You know, you can't say this in Atlanta. Couldn't have said it in New Orleans, or God forbid, Hattiesburg, Mississippi, any place like that, right? Okay, what about these? Let me see. Now, this is where you have to go back to the very beginning. these images. I ask you about this stuff, this media, the Johnson and Reconstruction cartoon. What message was Thomas Nast trying to convey in that Reconstruction Othello cartoon of 1866? First of all, it's a very busy, complicated cartoon. I don't expect you to know your Othello backwards or your Shakespeare backwards and forwards, but I think you can try to understand what's going on. What did you think? Remember, we use all kinds of different sources in history. It's not just printed, written things. Oh, sorry. This is written, trying to show how our introduction portrayed African Americans because it looks like a snake is strangling the African American while Andrew Johnson watches. Yes, that's at the bottom where he's trying to he's playing it, trying to charm a Confederate copperhead that's a snake strangling an African American. By the way, these are all the people in that that are all members of Lincoln's cabinet. See, this thing about Othello
Well,
is
no.
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, not only is he like watching him, he's playing like the flute thing to make the snake go.
Yeah.
So he's just, I don't know, like constructing what's happening to the African American.
Rather than killing the snake or getting rid of the problem, he's trying to charm the snake. And being a snake charmer, that's one of the reasons it's so that's when Nast is so, Nast nails you when he's angry at you or thinks you being a shilly-shallying politician or unprincipled, he really goes after you. And that's a way for him to say he thinks that Andrew Johnson is willing to put up with abuse and violence in order to bring about his version of Reconstruction. Okay, now what about the other print, the 15th Amendment print? This is harder to analyze because it seems so, in many ways, so bland. And you kind of have to really scroll in to seeing it. This is the one that's in color, the 1870 print celebrating the passage of the 15th Amendment. What themes come up here?
Almost depicting the newly gained rights and freedoms of freedmen.
Mm-hmm. The right to vote is depicted, right to marry. You can see at the bottom.
The cartoon like depicts togetherness, and with it being in color, it's like everything good that's happening is bringing it's instead of everything being black and white, it's bringing everything together and making the world more vibrant.
Well, I hadn't thought of that, but actually I think you're right. The color aspect of it is important. Yeah. And by the way, to make a color print in those days was expensive. It is so to go to all that trouble means you must want to put a lot of meaning into this. Well, there are all kinds of things you see in the bottom left. There's a school, then right next to that the marriage. Next to that is I presume the voting. This is being elected. Next one is state legislature. This is to have your own church, right? And on and on and on. Who are the white people, by the way, that are celebrated? Here, you may have to scroll in somewhat to see.
Is it Lincoln and Grant?
Lincoln and Grant on the left, Grant in the top left, and Lincoln down there, smaller picture at the bottom. Schuyler Colfax is in the upper right. Schuyler Colfax was the Speaker of the House. He's radical, not a radical Republican, but he was a strong anti-slavery Republican. Helped push the 13th Amendment through, things like that. And who's this white bearded person in near the bottom in the little oval picture? You might not be able to make that out. Brown, John Brown, as you see, you're right, Alyssa. John Brown, of course, was a fierce anti-slavery, a fierce abolitionist, part of Bleeding Kansas and all that. And after his death, he was definitely sanctified. Not sanctified. He was made a saint by an awful lot of people in the United States at the time, particularly African Americans. He was a great savior. That's where the John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave song comes from. Note at the very, very bottom, you have a key that shows you exactly, like the number 1 means reading. Number 1 is a depiction of reading the Emancipation Proclamation. Number 2 is life, liberty, and happiness. Right? It shows you what each thing means, right? Number 8 is the ballot box is open to all of us. You see the one in the bottom center. And on and on and on. This is a very, very detailed description of what people see as the effects of effectively the effects of the 15th Amendment. Okay. Now let me ask you one final question. Do these documents, the sources, help you understand Reconstruction better, help you understand the past better?
I think so.
Yeah,
Okay.
Definitely. It seems like a lot of the documents were a little more personal than just, the usual readings we do in the text. So it was easier to connect with the material overall.
Yeah, I think that's true, and that's why we assign them. And of course, that's what historians of this period spend 99% of their time looking at, are these original sources as close to the time of the events they're studying as possible. Yes, because it shows what's enacted, what this is saying, and put into the public to see what was really happening, especially with personal letters and testimonies. Yes, almost all of this. In fact, I don't think we have any private letters. I guess the letter from Jordan to his former master is private, but everything else is public. Either testimony to Sherman, testimony to Congress, public prints, public cartoons, things like that. It's Alyssa makes a very good point there. We're all very public. Okay,
thought
let's
it
leave
was
it there.
way more-
Sorry, well, go ahead. Who's gonna say that?
Sorry. I thought it was way more interesting to read like the personal stories than the material, just because it was personal, as she said. Just like the story, like the monologue, they would say, like, ask a question and then answer the question. Like, I thought it was way more interesting.
Good, I'm glad. Okay, listen to your podcast, listen to watch or listen to the video on the historical interpretations of Reconstruction. And again, I don't necessarily want you to transcribe everything that everybody says, but I want you to come up with questions and discussion points for Thursday. And again, we hope that we'll be in person, but if not, sorry, we'll do this again. But I really want you to take the lead, all of you to take the lead in coming up with the discussion points on those things. Okay?
How many questions are we supposed to write?
I'm sort of making this experimental. 1 or 2 questions per item. You know, 1 or 2 questions about what Professor Nash says in the Reconstruction podcast, 1 or 2 questions about the different varieties, different interpretations of Reconstruction in the video. If each person did 2 questions, in other words, 4 total, that would be a great discussion starter. Okay. Okay, let's leave it there. I'll put this up on the module as soon as it downloads. Okay. Okay. See you later.
Thank you. Have a good day.
See